Welcome to Political Trade Secrets, an inside look at campaigns and politics, where we pull back the curtain, look under the hood, and investigate all aspects of politics and how elections are won. Now, here's your host, Dustin Olson.
And welcome to Political Trade Secrets. I'm your host, Dustin Olson. It's great to have people already. People are coming across the internet to join us for this conversation. Hopefully people are excited to talk about fusion strategy. You probably have no idea what that is. There's a good reason. It's not something that many people know about. It's something I've been developing for about 15 years as a way to go about developing your strategy to have real innovation, to bring some creativity to it. So we're going to be talking about that. And to do so, I'm going to be joined here by my compatriot, and co-host, Sean Bartley. Sean, how the heck are you?
Good morning. Glad to be with you. I'm well and looking forward to this conversation. I know this is something that you've put a lot of time and effort in, and I'm looking forward to really getting a chance to share this with our audience and really dig into how it can make a difference. And as I've said, not just in politics, but in life. And where you really, generally we face challenges just about anywhere. So what an opportunity to have a different way to tackle them than the way you've always done it. So
that's a great way to say it. I couldn't say it better myself. And so if people want to join the conversation wherever they're at, if you are on YouTube or you're on Periscope, which is only going to be around for another few weeks, if you are on Facebook, Twitter, wherever you're at, please do leave a comment or question and join the conversation. Wherever you're at, we're watching the comments. We will bring it into the conversation. Whatever questions you might have, if you have ideas, examples, things that you'd like to share with folks, please do bring that into the conversation. And it looks like we already have a few comments coming in. So thank you very much. And we will include those into today's topic. There's another way you can actually join the conversation as well. You can join our Political Trade Secrets community right now on your phone. You can text me at 202-918-3345. Again, that's 202-918-3345. And if you text us there, you'll get a text back. You'll be able to opt in, click the link, and then you'll be getting text directly from me or from Sean about stuff going on in the news, our take on things, really the freshest political trade secrets out there. We're going to be providing those to everybody. So please do go join that. And also, if you are wanting to be a part of our community further, you can go to our website, politicaltradesecrets.com. You can join us. You can sign up to be a Political Trade Secrets insider, get exclusive stuff, as well as you can let us know if you'd like to be a part of our share force. Our share force is a really important way that you can help us with our mission, which is to help conservatives, to empower conservatives to be the most effective citizens possible, and to empower them to be the most powerful political leaders they can be for their community, for their state, and for our country. So if you want to be a part of that, helping other people, if you're not looking to run for office yourself, that's okay. You can be a political leader of whatever sort that you see is needed in your community. So you can also go join the Share Force. All right, so join the Share Force. Already, it looks like we have quite a few people sharing from across the internet already. So thank you for that to everybody who is sharing. That's really the simplest way you can join the Share Force. Just share the program wherever you're at, and you'll be able to do it. Who knows what conservative out there you might inspire to step up? Who knows, the future party leaders in your area or for our country might be somebody who listens to one of our episodes and thinks, you know what, I really could make the difference in my community, and I'm really the one to do it, and I'm going to step up. And they might be just a long lost friend of yours who saw it on your social media, and this inspired them. So please do share that. We really do appreciate it. And Sean, would you like to tell people other ways they can get involved and make a difference?
absolutely. Look, are you thinking about running for office, or are you looking for the most impactful way you can be a powerful political leader in your neck of the woods? Reach out to us. It's olsonstrategies.com, OLSON strategies.com. You can email me at Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. We would love to have that conversation with you today. And then we're also proud to be sponsored by Grassfire. What do they do? It's canvassing, petitioning, live calling. Look, this is the time of year people are already for races across the country are petitioning to get themselves on the ballot. It's also the time that people are looking to get issues onto the ballot so that people can vote on them either this year or next year, depending. So you get one shot to make the ballot. In a lot of states, it is an arduous task. So make sure that you're doing it with the professionals who don't just know the rules, but play by the rules and put your best foot forward. And that is the professionals at Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us. And then they also fuel 10centtexting.com. This is your opportunity to communicate with your voters, your constituents, right where they are. In a text message that includes an image, gift, or short video right in the body of the text message. Make sure that you are connecting with voters in a timely fashion. The world's moving fast these days. Make sure that you connect with them right where they are when it matters most, and it's 10centtexting.com.
That's excellent. And, this is another idea that really can impact people's strategies. I think 10centtexting.com was really the mother of necessity.
Yeah.
Created this as an idea that the pandemic and everything that was going on, Grassfire had to transition to the ability to, you were not having people out canvassing, and what can we do otherwise? And what happened is texting became a really great way to interact with people, and it turned out to be more personal than we ever thought possible, which is pretty amazing. I'm all about it. It's one of the best strategies I think people are using, or best tactics that people can use right now. We'll see how long it lasts, but for now, it's a great way to interact with people. Thank you for the good mornings that are coming in. We appreciate it. And for it looks like on Facebook, we already have 71 shares right now, which is great. Thank you very much to everybody who is doing that. We really do appreciate it. Who knows what conservative out there might be inspired to take on political leadership because of your share. We really do appreciate that.
Yeah, and that's what it's going to take, is people actually being able to see different ways of really grappling with issues that are going on or challenges that they're facing, maybe in politics, maybe in life, whatever it is, and be able to do that in a powerful way. And so, you're sharing, you're reaching out to folks really does make a difference. So, if you see something of value in this, we encourage you to share, because it really does make a difference. So we appreciate that. Yeah. And speaking of something of value, let's get into what the heck is fusion strategy, and why would it make a difference?
Yeah, so many years ago, when I had just gotten out of college and I was a field director at the Colorado Republican Party, you were a field director at the Ohio Republican Party. We had a great conversation yesterday about that with our friend Pat Melton, and talking about how to build party organizations. But when I started out, I wanted to learn as much as possible about political strategy, about political campaign management, all these different things. And there's these schools that you could do, like 3-day school. You might be able to do with the Republican National Committee, or various seminar type of things. But there really wasn't a real, I would say, intellectual background, intellectual history. There wasn't really any kind of course that you could take where you could actually learn what the heck is political strategy. So, and this is another case of it was a necessity. I just needed to figure out how to do strategy. And what I came upon, and maybe I was influenced by being a fan of Renaissance philosophers, scientists, artists, people who had looked at lots of different disciplines and had drawn from each of those during the Renaissance, and had created all sorts of new things from that. You think about Leonardo da Vinci, and he was both an inventor, and he was a painter, and all the different things that he did. So I don't know if it was that or what it was, but it really was a necessity. I wanted to learn strategy. So how was I going to do that? So I started looking at business strategy. I looked at people who were top of their field in business strategy. For instance, Michael Porter, who is one of the greatest writers on business strategy. And then I looked at military strategy, and I looked at Clausewitz, and I looked at Napoleon, and I looked at Eisenhower. I looked at various people who had been strategists in military, and then I looked at the old, like, historical documents. I looked at Musashi and Miyamoto Musashi, who was a samurai. I looked at Sun Tzu and the Art of War, and I just started looking at all these different ways. And I've mentioned it a couple of times. I actually looked at Billy Graham's Crusades and how they organized to create the big tent revivals. I just kept looking at all these different places, and I eventually started realizing I was developing a discipline of what I would call comparative strategy, to look at strategy from very different vantage points, from different disciplines, from completely different parts of the world, and that I was going to be bringing that into politics. So I was looking at it from the perspective of a completely different discipline. I was looking at it from standing in someone else's shoes with different challenges, and I looked for what was the same and what was different, and then that would help me with fresh eyes be able to see maybe a new solution, a new pathway that I could move forward with in political strategy. And there's been so many innovations that have come from that for us. I would say even instant texting is an example of that kind of an approach, as we just mentioned, looking at something totally different to solve a problem that may not have been readily obvious that would be the way to deal with canvassing, was to be texting, for instance. Is a good example of that.
It's a great point. So when you were getting into this, what where did you look first?
Yeah, so I first tried looking for political strategy books, and what I found, what most of them were basically political philosophy books. They were mostly talk radio show hosts who are great, but they had written books about their ideas about policy, and that wasn't really helpful in how to win an election. So the next place I looked
in there, Rush Limbaugh, we did the tribute, and he said, "It's not my job to win elections." It's not what I'm in the business of. So, what you're saying is, you have these radio personalities which have their job, and most of them make it very clear what their job isn't, which is what your job and our job is. So,
and the funny thing is that, as he said that, and he said his success isn't reliant on who wins elections, and that's one, that's self-reliant, and that's a pretty awesome perspective to take on. And the truth is, he is a fusion strategist. He is a comparative strategist. He is somebody who looked at lots of different places. He was in radio, but he also worked in sports and entertainment, and he had a lot of different experiences that he brought into it. Honestly, he did a fusion strategy. At the time, nobody had been a talk radio show host who was ultimately trying to be an entertainer. He was mostly a disc jockey who just happened to bring politics and political views into his disc jockey kind of entertainment. And that was a whole innovation. He took two things that didn't seem like they went together, and he added them. And this is oftentimes how new inventions and new ideas come about, is that two things that people didn't think were going to go together came together. Elvis would be a fusion strategist. He brought pickles and peanut butter, I think, to sandwiches. I don't know if all the ideas are always great, but for him, he was a fusion strategist when it came to that.
Yeah. He also brought blues in with rock and
roll and rhinestones. So he did lots of stuff. It's really good. So ultimately, what you're doing is you're artificially, in a way, creating fresh eyes. You're actually bringing a constant. If you do this consistently, and I would say at this point it's become part of my nature to do this, you are able to create a constant beginner's mind. We talked about that last week, and you're constantly able to give yourself fresh eyes to be able to see the landscape. And ultimately, that's what you're doing when you're doing a strategy. You're figuring out how to get from point A right here to some objective out in the, out there, point B. And considering the landscape that you have to traverse, you come up with the path that you're going to take. And ultimately, when you take on this kind of an approach, you think about, well, how would an engineer perhaps look at this problem? You're going to get a fresh perspective from a completely different vantage point. And so what you're doing, we've talked about this before, where we talk about blind spots. That's something, I think I have a paper in here to show people that the idea of what you know and what you don't know, and what you don't know that you don't know, which we've got right here.
Yep.
In the region of what you don't know that you don't know, these are complete blind spots. These are things that often are running the show because of your ignorance of them. You're completely blind to it, yet it's still a filter that you're seeing the world through. Kind of like the fish who lives in water but doesn't realize that water is different than air, and so on and so forth. It's a completely different perspective, and it's a place of discovery. So by creating beginner's mind constantly, by creating fresh eyes, by looking at whatever your problem is from a completely different vantage point, you're able to adopt these different point of views and possibly get other eyes and directions into where those blind spots are, and it can give you some insights. And you don't even have to become a expert in this other perspective. Oftentimes you just have to get a sense and almost pretend like maybe you want to figure out how a lawyer would look at it. You're not a lawyer, you're not going to go to law school, but you talk to a few lawyers about how they would look at an issue, and you take on that perspective, and that gives you some new insight that you didn't have before.
Have you found a challenge with the idea of not becoming an expert in some area? Like, hey, I just need to know enough of this to apply it here. Not, I need to know so much of it that, I could teach a class on, engineering, for example, or whatever the case may be.
Well, there always becomes a point of diminishing returns, I think, where it's basically you learn 20% of it, and that's 80% of the effective information. So that's what you're looking for, is what's the most useful information, what's the most useful tools, and get the 20% that gives you 80% of the whole discipline. And that's ultimately what you're going for. For instance, we have a lot of game design in our consulting practice, and I've designed a couple of games. You're playing one of the games that I designed right now, which is pretty cool. Prolific 360, which is a card game based on to help people in developing their health regimen.
Yeah.
And I'm not a game designer. I'm not an expert at game design, but I've studied it and have tried it out, and we've created some games. And am I an expert? Am I going to be hired by Milton Bradley anytime soon? I don't think so. But I've been able to learn some of the key principles and have been able to apply that to campaigns. And I think it's useful. And I have to say that it blows me away that a game I created on a whim 2 years ago is being played today. Just kind of a bit humbling, honestly. And I was a little bit not so sure it was that good of a game, but if it's empowering people, that's what matters.
Yeah. Well, I think that gets to another question, right? Which is really having intention when you're looking at all of this.
Mm-hmm.
So what intention or intentions did you bring to this? Or, we've already talked about beginner's mind. We actually did a whole episode on that. Have you found that that was one of the most important things to bring to the whole idea? And as you've been building this and cultivating it over a decade and a half, or what else was there?
Yeah, no, that's insightful. If you don't have an intention to learning some new discipline or learning anything, you're not going to necessarily get what you're looking to get out of it. For instance, you might meet somebody who is a lawyer all day, and then when they go home, they set that perspective aside. That's probably a healthy thing to do, but being able to move between the different perspectives that you have is very helpful. So when I go into trying to learn a whole new discipline or learn, an area of study, I'm not looking to become an expert, but what I'm looking for is my intention is to pull it towards me, to ask the question constantly, how can I profit from this? How can I use this to benefit whatever it is that my big objective is? So whenever I take a course, let's say one of the tools and resources I'm going to recommend is the Great Courses, which is or the Great Courses Plus, which is a whole library of online courses, like college level courses, really amazing resource. And I will go into learning about some discipline there. And I'm constantly thinking about, how can I use this to improve political strategy? How can I use this to help empower candidates to be powerful political leaders? That's constantly, whether I'm listening to or watching a course on Greek philosophy, or on world history, or on psychology and neuroscience. I'm always thinking about, how can this help empower people to be powerful political leaders? That's what I'm looking for. So everything is going through that filter, and it's answering that question, which is ultimately the intention: is how can I profit from this with what I'm out to do in the world? And so that's really the intention is so important.
Yeah, and so back to something we were talking about just a little earlier. Pat commented, "Fresh is best. See the forest through the trees."
Yeah.
And so really bringing a fresh perspective. We talked about it at the beginning. We really talked about it just a couple of minutes ago. But a great reminder there. That is a critical thing here. And I think really looking at how you've developed this has really given access to that for folks and clients. So how has this helped with either working directly with clients and developing the overall campaign and strategy for clients? And I think those are two different areas. That's why I asked.
Yeah, it definitely is. But to Pat's point, see the forest through the trees. Actually, this is something that, as you probably know, I'm a fan of studying Stoic philosophers in particular, and there's one of the Stoic philosophers who talks about taking the bird's eye view. It's a very old concept, and talks a lot about that, and how if you can hover over the forest and see the trees, that's the whole idea, that you can have the long view from a historical perspective, and you can bring calm into it. So that's actually something that, from studying Stoic philosophy, I've tried to bring into a strategic perspective, because it gives you a little bit of maybe some more calm. So that's an example of using that, as well as this is how using comparative strategy and fusion strategy ultimately. Fusion is ultimately taking the best stuff from lots of different disciplines and putting them together so that they are greater than the sum of their parts. And when you are looking at a completely new discipline, you have to look at it from the perspective of being a neophyte. You've never looked at it before. It requires you to have that beginner's mind, and all you can see is the forest. Because one of the things that happens when you go past that first 20%, or you're trying to get to like the 90% of having all the information about a certain discipline, you start to have old assumptions become how you deal with things, right? That's part of what happens when you're doing any kind of work for a long time. You start to have rules of thumb and things like that that you are using to get the job done. And when you're coming into something with a completely different perspective, you've never looked at it before, you see the things that are the same, you see the things that are different, and it forces you to have that view of the forest, because you do not have the expertise to go into the trees at that point. And so that's been really powerful. So for campaigns, thinking about Billy Graham and the Billy Graham crusades and the big tent revivals. So any one of those kind of organizations, like when they were doing these back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, they would send emissaries, or coalition builders, I guess you would call them, into an area like a year in advance oftentimes. And they would work with churches in the area, with different community leaders, and they would actually do a kind of community organizing in advance of the big tent revival. And that would be how they were creating like a coalition of people throughout the community to recruit and bring people to the the big tent revival. And it was just this, after a while, you started having this groundswell of people showing up. And that is, if you can do that in a campaign, that would be really powerful. You know when election day is, and you're starting usually a year out. So it really was helpful in thinking about how to go about grassroots organizing, is what I learned from that. And actually yesterday or the day before, I mentioned the Billy Graham principle. I picked that up, which we've used in campaigns and has been helpful to our candidates to avoid compromising situations. Some people call it the Mike Pence principle now, but Mike Pence got it from Billy Graham ultimately, that he doesn't have meetings with some of the opposite sex without somebody else there, which is smart. So Michael Porter, in his 5 factors of strategy, I have used that quite a bit. Something from Miyamoto Musashi that I use is the idea of the 2-sword technique. You have both the offensive sword and you have the defensive sword. And when we think about communication strategy, that's how we're always thinking about how we're pressing forward with our offensive message, and then also with the defensive communication strategy as well, to avoid attacks on our person. So I think about it that way. And then the greatest example, though, is probably reading Sun Tzu, and how Sun Tzu has really affected the Olson strategy sweet spot, which we've got right here. So I have these, since I did them on other shows, I have them ready to go.
Yeah.
Now. So, but this is based on the idea of attack what is weak, avoid what is strong. And so that's ultimately what we have here. And then we've added in the voters' concerns, and we look at that. And so I use, Venn diagram ultimately. So that's a perfect example of a fusion strategy that's been informed by, I think Sun Tzu was around 2,500 to 2,700 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he's informing what people are thinking about today, which is pretty remarkable. Also, I have to give a shout out. There's one book that had a really big impact on me. It's called Strategic Intuition. And it really is about coup d'oeil, which is this idea. It's a French word. It was coined by Clausewitz when he wrote on war. And it's the idea, because he studied Napoleon. He'd worked, he had been in the military of the Prussian military who had fought Napoleon. But he really saw that Napoleon was ultimately this intuitive strategist, and that when he just knew the lay of the land so well, when he saw an opening, he was taking action as he saw it. And so he called it a flash of insight. Coup d'oeil means a flash of the eye in French. So he really coined that, and this was a really good book, Strategic Intuition, and it probably had a real impact in developing this idea of fusion strategy, as well as to be able to constantly try to spark coup d'oeil, spark insight, spark that intuition to be able to find new openings, and to constantly have a system to actually pull that off.
Yeah. I think so in really thinking about those influences in particular, were you surprised, particularly with more Eastern influences and how they've had an influence really on what we're doing in Western elections here?
Yeah. Well, the thing, this is the idea that I have around this, is that strategy as a teacher, strategy as a way of problem solving, as finding a path, that there's infinite ways to solve any situation, any kind of challenge, and that strategy as a teacher is really universal. So it doesn't matter if it's Eastern or if it's Western or it's 2,000 years ago or it's last week, that there's all these different perspectives, and they're all giving you access as to pathways that you might take to achieve your objective. So for me, by looking at it is from the perspective of, there are a lot of people who have figured out how to do things and be successful, that there is really taking out those artificial constraints of whether it's Western or Eastern or anything else. Just looking at it from a fresh perspective is really great. And actually, the more foreign it is to you, the more opportunity there is to have that beginner's mind, to have that fresh perspective, and to bring that into it. So the way I talked about it before is asking the question, how can I profit from this? How can I use this in what I'm doing? So always pulling it for you. It's like you're borrowing their lens for a day. Like if I were to look at this from the perspective of Sun Tzu and the Art of War, if I look through that filter at my problem or the challenge that I'm trying to beat, what would I see if I look through that filter? And that's pretty powerful. So as we're talking about how to use this, there are probably people are already thinking of some great leaders who are fusion strategists. Or in a way, I would also look at, a lot of this for me was influenced by the Renaissance. So Renaissance men and women, people who really oftentimes are going to be folks who either have borrowed from different disciplines that they may not be experts in, or they happen to have had a career where they have been actively in lots of different careers. And so they're able to bring lots of different perspectives just because they have lots of different experiences. And I'd be curious if people want to share with us who they might think of as fusion strategists, people who've taken the best from different disciplines to solve problems to really be breakout successes. And Sean, we've been thinking about this all morning. Who would you say is your favorite, or what you'd call your best fusion strategist?
Well, boy, best and favorite. Well, what I'd really say to this point is I was thinking of inventors
Mm-hmm.
as I was thinking about this. So I think about Einstein, who had to bring a lot of different things together, and really, you know, you think about how many times he did not succeed with inventing the light bulb and
Edison.
Edison, yes, yes. And but you think about all the times he didn't succeed, and then so just being able to bring a new outlook on it each and every time really, I think, made a huge difference there. So I think about him, think about the Wright Brothers and Benjamin Franklin. I mean, these were guys that. Well, Benjamin Franklin was a Renaissance man. It was really he checks off all the boxes you were talking about.
Scientist, printer, writer, humorist, a great philosopher, and I'm sure I forgot a bunch of other things. A diplomat, and a politician. Yeah, fusion strategist. That's exactly right. The Wright brothers. You're a Buckeye. You're an Ohioan. And there's always a fight between the North Carolinians and the Ohioans, but they had their bike shop.
That's right.
And you are a Dayton Flyer, right?
I am. So the Wright brothers are near and dear to my heart. And just think about how they took the idea of flying and the idea of what they already. So they took some of what they already knew, and that's something we haven't gotten into too much. But you are going to take some things you do know into this, or that you've discovered along the way. So they take that, but then they said, okay, there's something else to it, and so then they started testing and theorizing on other ways to do this. And so I think you saw that, but then you really look at the evolution of flying. It could have been easy to say, okay, we just need to get more ways to have things pedaled more, and then maybe we can fly longer, but it was like, well, the combustion engine's a better way to do that.
But it's pretty remarkable. So the problem with flight before they got into the whole flying business is everybody was thinking about it. They're thinking about it from the perspective of sea ships. Like they were thinking about it from a watercraft perspective of how a boat actually goes through the water, and that's how people were imagining the future airplanes would work, is that they would travel through the air just as a boat travels through the water. So they thought of them as airships. They're gonna float through the air, and that wasn't useful. People were creating very heavy and they're creating, just a different kind of a machine based off of that model. Then the Wright brothers, who had a bicycle shop, they thought more like a bicycle and how a bicycle turns and whatnot. And you think about it now, that's exactly how airplanes move, is very similar to how a bicycle moves. So when they brought in the mental model of how bicycles work and how the forces that are at play, that was the innovation that gave us the opportunity to actually gain flight, was because they had that completely different perspective than what people had been bringing to that problem the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, and it really gets to what you're talking about, bringing a new perspective, um, and who knows how we'd be getting around if the Wright brothers hadn't brought that perspective to the idea of flight,
Mm-hmm.
which
Something
very
we've
clearly was created in Ohio. I want to just make sure
they just had to go to Kitty Hawk because they had lots of wind there.
that's right.
I understand. So the Wright brothers are a really great example. Like, it's really clear example. Da Vinci, we mentioned before, he would look to nature to get inspiration for how to create his inventions. Many of his inventions were basically a carbon copy of things that were already in nature. You think about political leaders. Ronald Reagan is a great example. Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump are probably two of the greatest examples of people who were, and I'd also put George Washington in there. He was a general, he was a farmer, he had all sorts of different things that he was doing. Also, I'd put Thomas Jefferson in there. He was also an inventor, and all sorts of different things that he did. And what it did is it gave him a way to think about things a little bit differently. So with Reagan, he really got what it was to be on camera.
Yep.
And how to really communicate through the camera, regardless of what the media was saying. He was able to communicate through the camera and reach out to the American people and to communicate with them. He worked on his sense of humor and so many things over the years. He, as a pitchman for GE, he developed his speeches for decades. So he really used these very different experiences to create what would be a transformative leader.
Yeah. Well, and being the GE pitch person, he lived in the GE home,
Mm-hmm.
and so
All about innovation.
it was, and so he really was around that all the time. I mean, it was really a life created that
Mm-hmm.
way, and he lived into it, and then but then really getting to know where people were and what was of interest to them. And I think certainly out of the GE days, more than probably anything else, really made a huge difference there. But then you're right, being able to talk to the camera, that's something that, and talk to the person beyond it, was really something that he was able to bring to the table. We actually had a few from our texts out. Let's see, we had Thomas Aquinas.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And let's see, Archimedes.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
And there was one more here. I'm missing it. Sorry, Euclid. And I think there was one more in here. But yeah, so really looking at kind of the Greek influence in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And really got into it, and actually some great comments about this over there. We'll share some of them, but really like going to Archimedes, philosopher, mathematician, astronomer, physicist, engineer, inventor. So really thinking about, they really, and a lot of these folks had a lot of those cross disciplines, and really applying a lot of those thoughts. Aristotle was another
Mm-hmm.
one. So
that's great. I actually really like going back to the Greek philosophers, because they had an idea of developing the whole person, and to develop themselves physically, mentally, spiritually, and the like, and to learn lots of different. At that time, it was just called philosophy. It was everything, basically. They were learning everything about everything. And that's really had a big impact. You asked the question of where we've used this in our actual consulting business, and then also on our campaigns. And from the Greek philosophers and through philosophy, we really have taken on learning and using ontology and phenomenology in particular, which are just two big words to mean who you're being. We've talked about that a lot this week, and that's really great in communications to actually break it down to as simple as who you're being in the moment when you're doing a media interview. If you're just clear about who you're being in that moment, then you will your words and how you present yourself will all follow. You don't have to like try to think about the thousands of different things to do in every single second. If you're just standing there being X, Y, and Z, then it's all going to pretty much come out the way that you want it to. And that's been something. Phenomenology is simply a big word to say your experience of the world. And we talk about that perception is reality. That is the most basic idea. It's what we're talking about here. We're actually talking about phenomenology. We're talking about actually adopting and taking on other people's perspectives and their experiences of the world in order to solve our problem. So that's ultimately what we're doing here. That's been a big influence in this. And that's been from Greek philosophy as well as physics. Physicists grapple with these questions about what the nature of reality is. Fake news, talking about fake news, Donald Trump gave the world probably the best, what I would call strategic distinction, best mental model for people is that they could just, hold these two words in their mind, fake news, to give themselves a moment to not just believe everything that they see in the media, and to get that that's affecting their reality. And it happens in a matter of a second with the words fake news, and you don't have to think about it, but it allows you to do that. So we have created what we call strategic distinctions. These are mental models. So this is what we're doing when we're looking at these different disciplines, these different ways people have solved things, is we're coming up with lots of different perspectives, which we call strategic distinctions, which are basically mental models, ways to look at things. And one of the people we've mentioned a couple of times, we haven't really got into it, is Donald Trump. One of the telltale signs of somebody who is a fusion strategist is that they have been successful in lots of different, very different areas of life, things that you wouldn't expect. From being a developer to being a reality TV show host to being president of the United States, these are completely different things, to being an author, and just go down the line of all the different things that he's done and he's been successful at. A fusion strategist is going to be one of those. Ben Franklin, he's an inventor. He's a politician. He helps found a country. I mean, he starts the postal service. He starts libraries. It's remarkable the things that he did that were completely unrelated.
Yeah.
And was successful.
So you mentioned that we actually got a few more from our text line. So if you're out there, Dustin, you might want to put up the text line.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
How to join us there. You can text 202-918-3345. And it's a great way you can communicate with us anytime, and it's a great way to be part of the show. You can do it right now if you want. As one of our listeners did, who said Scott Adams, Elon Musk, and Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, no. Elon Musk just decided he was going to, it almost sounds like a joke, but he decided to create the Boring Company. It's these big earth movers that bore into the earth. And, he calls it the Boring Company. And then he just decided to go to space. He decided to have a car company, but ultimately it's not a car company. It's an energy company. Mm-hmm. He just decides to do things that are completely different. And it all came from doing PayPal ultimately. Those are really great examples of that. Somebody that we've talked about on this show who is a fusion strategist and has really made a difference in what we do, as well as a couple of our guests have talked about it, is Donald Miller, who wrote the book, The Story Brand Method. And he used to be a screenwriter in Hollywood, and now he's a business consultant, and he really talks a lot about marketing. He took basically the formula of every story, every movie, every fable, every myth, and he applied that to marketing. And so when we talk about be the Yoda, not the Skywalker, we are using his expertise that he had as a screenwriter, and we're now applying it to politics, because ultimately you need to look at all of the voters in your district as Skywalkers. They're the heroes in their story. You're the Yoda who's coming along to empower them and support them in being that hero to their own story. So we're taking that along and applying that. And by the way, in his trainings, he points to Donald Trump as one of the best at doing that process.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's actually missed in how Donald Trump communicated. He really always made it about the people he was serving, and people in Middle America and the forgotten people. And it is amazing. It goes back to the filters conversation we were having earlier. Is if your filter is Orange Man bad, you think all he's doing is talking about himself. And what he really said was, no, in the actual communication, he said, "Here are the things I'm up to, and this is about you, not me. And when they attack me, they're attacking you."
Yep.
And it's clear that many millions of Americans agree with that assessment. I mean,
And he's not just done it for himself. I think he's teaching other Republican leaders to do it. And I think there's some Democrats who've paid attention. They're not going to say publicly that they paid attention, but there's definitely some Democrats who are paying attention to him, and they're not just assuming that it's all terrible. They actually get that he was very skilled as president and is skilled now and possibly again in the future as president. So there are people who are watching that. And one person who I think is a really a great example of a fusion strategist is his daughter, Ivanka Trump, as well.
yes.
She's been highly successful in business and in the world of fashion and having a fashion line. And now she's a policy expert. And, we work with a lot of people who are in the administration, and I have never met anybody who has anything bad to say about her. She handles herself extremely well. And, these are things that she probably learned from her dad, but she also has developed on her own in the world.
Yeah. Well, I think that she is a great example, because you really do look across. I mean, not too many people go from fashion, designing their own fashion line to writing policy. Very, very few, in fact. I think one, to my knowledge. And, but, very skilled in both, to be perfectly honest. And really was able
and
to
reality TV. She was also on the program with her dad. And then I think about Oprah.
Yeah.
She is an amazing fusion strategist, somebody who's been big in media, publishing, business, and self-help, everything. She's been big in everything, in films. Pretty much Oprah touches things and they turn to gold. So that's another thing, is that people who are involved in lots of things and they almost always go well. They are. So I don't know what this comment is, but I want to know what it is. It says only you, Sean. I'm not quite sure what that's referring to. I assume that it's that everything you touch turns to gold. That's what I think that comment was to.
That's a great question. I don't know. What were we talking about that only I would have?
I think it was that everything you touch turns to gold. That's my
well,
opinion.
I like it. Let's go with that.
Yeah. And then I had one other person that I was thinking about. Well, actually, just think about people who've been on the show. It's interesting that one of our early episodes on the live stream, we talked with Drew Ryan, who created, a great canvassing live calling app that the Republican Party uses. And he's actually been influenced by the Story Brand method and Donald Miller. It's partly why they called it campaign sidekick, as opposed to being campaign hero. It's campaign sidekick. It's there to support the hero in the story, which is all the volunteers out there and all the campaigns who are out there being the heroes. And then I think about, we had a great conversation with John Rogers about his background as an equities trader.
Yeah.
And taking reversion to the mean and applying it to politics.
Yeah.
And it really gave us some new insights when he was able to give us that perspective.
Well, and I think when you look at that, it really does make a huge difference, to be able to take a look at what, um, really how any background, and it's something that you and I were talking about in show
Mhm.
prep, how any background can make a difference in politics. So if
Yeah.
you're out there and you say, well, I can't run for office because I've done X, or
Mhm.
like as a career, or I've only done Y, and you need some other type of experience. No, I mean you can come from any walk of life to have a powerful political impact, and
Yeah.
so um, I think it's pretty interesting. John Rogers talked about basically, he said, "Oh, this was kind of the thing to do." He learned it, and then what he really got was, "Oh, I can apply this to politics and be better at that." So, and I enjoy it. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and that's the great thing is you can take what's good. I studied neuroscience in college, and I would hate my life if that was what I had actually done because I doing research and all that stuff. I just would not have been interested in doing it. However, I learned the things I needed to learn out of it to really make a difference in marketing and in politics. That I got more out of that than my political philosophy classes at the time. So I want to stop the presses. So Ivanka Trump was not the first fusion strategist to go from fashionista to Politico, according to Pat Melton. And I really think this is important because he saw it early. The original fashionista to Politico was Sean Bartley. So that is what he was referring to there, and I'm glad we got some clarification because otherwise we would have made a mistake and we would not have given Sean his due as being
I,
the
I can't
fashionista.
argue. I can't argue with a word of that. So,
Exactly. Oh my goodness. Also, Lee Vacher, who's our pollster in residence, doing the grass fire polling report for us occasionally. He is formerly a commercial real estate broker,
yes,
and a lot of his analytical abilities came from the research side of that business, and he applied that to polling, and then also creating systems for businesses is something that he did from that he's applied to what we work with him on is the call center and various things. So he's really brought that in. So there's so many interesting people. It's one of the reasons why when we have someone on, I always ask them about other things that they've done and get whatever they maybe learned from those experiences that can be applied to politics. And what you're pointing out about people running for office is really brilliant because we pretty much have a system of government that systematizes comparative strategy and fusion strategy. We have 535 members of the Congress, and the hope is that they all bring these very different perspectives and ways of solving problems. When we end up with most of them being lawyers, we're not getting that. But when we have people from lots of walks of lives, they are going to give you different perspectives that are going to help solve problems. That's the intention.
and I think we're actually starting to get back to that a little bit.
Yeah.
You kind of look around. We another guest of ours who is owns Shooter's Grill,
Hmm.
and then becomes a member of Congress. Well, that is a completely different outlook that she's bringing to Congress than a lot of other folks. Small business owner, restaurant owner, and for anybody who knows the restaurant business at all, you're talking low margins. You're talking a lot. It really takes a lot to be able to be successful in
And
that.
she's from a pretty rural part of Colorado that has mountains in the way to get there.
Yes. So there you're relying, of course, on a lot of repeat business.
Mhm.
You're relying on people that are, so service is going to be important. So really just think about all it takes to be successful in a rural area. When you're talking one business, it's not like it's, I think, you look back over time, uh, the the founder of Kohl's was a U.S. senator, so that's a little different. When you go, oh well, that guy was in retail, sure.
Mhm.
Uh, He was, but he also, he brought a different perspective, which was also like what it takes to manage a whole brand across
Mm-hmm.
across several stores and whatnot. So I think they're really looking at and having different perspectives, and we're seeing more of that.
Yeah.
And I
Well, I
think
want
that,
to go to Lauren Boebert, who you were talking about, Congresswoman
yes,
Boebert. That what you just described, and one of the things that she did with Shooter's Grill, she made it a destination spot.
yeah,
She had people, because they had the servers wearing sidearms. It's, I think, is all female servers wearing sidearms. Not something you'd expect to see. It became national news. All sorts of people heard about it. It's been a big deal in Colorado for a long time. People would travel to Rifle, I believe is where it's at.
yep,
They would travel to Rifle to go to Shooter's Grill. Like, people just wanted to go to Shooter's Grill. She made it really interesting. She made it the thing to talk about. And is it surprising that she's the best known freshman member of Congress? She's the one people are talking about. She's the one people are trying to get on their television shows. It's not surprising. She developed that with her business out of the needs that her business had to be successful.
yeah. Oh, exactly right. And then, but she also is bringing other perspectives that are not necessarily well represented. She's the mother of young children. So that's another perspective she's bringing to this. So I think and that's just one member. I think you kind of see the new class is you really have a lot of different backgrounds. I think some have been in commercial real estate and development and stuff like that, as opposed to. So I think, and I don't know if the percentage of lawyers has gone down, but I do think what you're seeing across the board though is more a broader swath of folks, because it used to just be 2 or 3 types of people that were serving for a very long time.
Well, I'd like to go through. People could feel free to keep telling us other fusion strategists that you are aware of, and we'll keep taking examples of that. But to just quickly recap on kind of how you go about this. One is to constantly be bringing yourself to beginner's mind, always looking at things from a fresh perspective, always looking at the landscape from a whole new perspective. So it's going to be being curious, being humble. I think that's a big part of it, that you don't know everything. So you have to go look at how other people have learned those things, going and adopting different perspectives, and really ultimately pulling the data, the information, the perspective towards you, borrowing the lens of a whole different discipline or profession to you, and looking at it to solve problems in your own life. And a couple of resources that I think would be really helpful for people to do this is, there's a couple of books. Ultra Learning. It's a really good book about how to go about learning that 20% of a discipline quickly, to do it over like a 6-week period, and actually has a lot of ways to set up a way to learn that. I try to use that when I did the game design stuff. That's how I went about it, is using the Ultra Learning. So it's a book called Ultra Learning. Highly recommend it. We had someone mention Scott Adams, who we mention often on the show. I would give you 2 of his books. So he's the creator of Dilbert. He's a cartoonist. He also used to be in the business world, and has an MBA. And of course, Dilbert is a comic strip about workplaces and how they're dysfunctional. So he brought his experience being in the business world and his drawing skills, and he created a comic that became wildly successful. But he wrote a book called How to Fail at Almost Everything and Still Win Big, which is all about systems and developing systems on how to constantly gain skills to improve your likelihood of success. And then his second book, which we think a lot of, and I don't think you'd call him a fusion strategist, but it's all about Donald Trump and his persuasion abilities, which is Win Bigly. Highly recommend it for anybody running for office, regardless of your party. And in that, he talks about talent stacks. And his idea is that if you take a talent stack, the idea is that he looks at himself, or he looks at Trump, and he says, Trump has this reality TV background. He has this business background. He's, pretty good at speaking. And the idea is that you don't have to be necessarily the absolute best at everything, but if you can be pretty good at a bunch of different disciplines or skills, or talents, and you can start stacking them together, you can get your own unique blend of those that's going to have you excel. So he's taking kind of this idea and he's giving you a way to go about developing yourself as a fusion strategist.
Yeah. And actually, the idea of the talent stack says that, like, being the expert in one area doesn't make the difference. It's really being able to say, okay, I do these things fairly well, pretty well. Okay, what does melding that all together bring about? So, we mentioned Lauren Boebert, right? What she did pretty well is market, and and build a destination spot. But she also got that when the pandemic came, that, hey, following these lockdowns doesn't work. Yep. And so she really got to be outspoken on that, and it was congruent with who she was, and she knew ways to actually further the conversation on it, and that was
one of the things about one of her talent stacks, or one of the talents within her talent stack, is that she got clear at a fairly young age about what her bedrock principles were. Like, what are the things that are like, I will take a stand on this? And then she's used those along with her marketing abilities, her business abilities, and she's used her experiences as a mom. She's used her experiences as I think she's a marksman and all that. So all these different things, she's brought them all together into a very unique package that no one else can replicate. And so ultimately, it gives you a competitive advantage when you start to have all these different perspectives. There's no one else who's Ben Franklin. No one else could even. It would be kind of silly to try to be Ben Franklin. Now, you can be your own version of a Ben Franklin. You can be your own version of whoever you are with a bunch of different talent stacks. Ronald Reagan and Donald Trump have things in common, but they're different people. We had Ben Higgins on, and he's the former bachelor. And one of the things we saw in him is his comfort level being under scrutiny. Yeah. Now, he talked about in the show that it was difficult and whatnot, but he was able to develop a pretty thick skin from being in reality TV and having like half the world upset that he told two women that he loved them on a TV show, and so on and so forth. And that gave him a pretty thick skin, which I thought at the time that would be pretty good in politics. Yeah. And I don't think he's going to do anything in politics going forward, but still that, these kinds of different experiences can have a real experience. A couple of other things that I think are really great tools and resources to develop yourself as a fusion strategist. The Great Courses Plus is a really great online. We don't get anything from saying this, but it's like $30 a month or something. And you can go and they even have great courses on how to think like a lawyer, how to think like a philosopher, and how to think like an engineer, which you could do like 30 classes and you have enough information to kind of take on those perspectives. Hopefully no one's going to hire you to design and build a bridge if you do the how to think like an engineer. That would be a bad idea, but maybe you can think about things a little bit differently than how you were looking at it before. I mentioned the book Strategic Intuition. And then the last one is any kind of mental models, any books about mental models, what we call strategic distinctions. This show, I think, is a great place to look. Political Trade Secrets is all based on really providing these strategic distinctions, these mental models, to be able to give people lots of different perspectives on how to go about solving problems and to reach into your toolbox and pull out another way to look at it that maybe is going to give you the insight that's going to make the difference.
Yeah. Well, I think those are great resources. Thanks for sharing those. Is there any last things that you want people to go away with? Like, if they go away with nothing else, what is the thing to go away with from this idea of fusion strategy and applying it in your life?
Yeah. Well, I would say be curious, be humble, and always, whatever you're doing, when you're being curious and humble about it, like learning something, is always pull it towards you. Always try to take on that lens and look at your situation and the challenges you're facing and how you can use it to best those, how to solve whatever you're dealing with. So if you can just take on that lens and use it to have some forward progress in your own life with whatever you're dealing with everything, it doesn't matter. Even if you're watching a TV show, how can I use this to take on what I have to take on in my life? And if you do that constantly, this will become first nature for you. It's going to be the thing that you bring to everything, and you're going to have some new insights. It's just going to be a really rich and fun life, learning so many different things and having all of those come back and help you with whatever you're dealing with.
Yeah, that is spot on. I think it really is helpful for folks out there. So really appreciate you taking the time to share this today, because it really made a difference. And I know we'll be talking about this in the future and applying some other things that we've got. We could talk about this for quite some time. I know we have conversations about this offline about how to really develop this and areas that really make a difference, and we'll get into some of the rest of those. But I do think that this really is a great primer for folks to say, yeah, I want to get in some places to look, some people to look at, and some things to do to really get into this idea of fusion strategy. It's not just in Asian cuisine anymore. It really is everywhere in life. So, so yeah, Dustin.
Yeah. Well, I would like to also point out that you are quite the fusion strategist. And this last year, you've been taking on, in particular, the leadership course that you're doing.
Yeah.
You're taking on lots of different new perspectives, and it's really pretty cool. Any insights or anything from that you think that you've learned that could be applied to politics? Because they've actually been showing up in the show.
Yeah.
And maybe we haven't called them out.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I think one thing that really makes a difference is being able to looking at things newly, and do what they call recreating a situation. So we talked about it the other day when we were talking about someone who was going to try to get the endorsement of another person and saw him as an a-hole.
Yes.
And that's one way to look at someone, by the way. And if you don't call it out and say, yeah, that's kind of how I look at you, for yourself prior, it's going to just be there the whole time. And you're going to just, kind of put a facade over it. You'll try your best to do it. And but it's always going to show itself out. So, but by declaring that and saying, okay, that's something that's there for me, and then also being able to see this person as a mentor, and someone who, takes their call and is open to new people being in the party and whatnot, really gave a whole new outlook, and led to not just an endorsement, which is great, but really a moving conversation, and what I understand to still be to this day a great friendship. So. And that's something that came out of it, and that's something, you can see it in others, but really being able to develop that is something that's been important. And I know we'll be talking about that more too, but I do think it's something that you're able to really fuse into anything else there. So it's kind of looking.
That's cool. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be for politics. You can use that in your personal life, and that's something you've gotten out of the leadership course. That's pretty cool. So there's all sorts of ways.
When I'm on hold, you're on hold, and you're like, oh, what is going on the other end? I will recreate that they're there to serve me, and they can't wait.
Yeah. Otherwise, for me, it'd be rip their head off as soon as they come on.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, and I normally get 45 minutes to create that. So,
all right. It's most important to do it right before they come on. Otherwise, it may be a little bit stale. It
can disappear quickly. Yes.
All right. Well, if you'd like to, we've had a lot of people who've provided great insights throughout the show by sending us text. You can join the texting community by texting me at 202-918 888-3345. We will be sending out lots of the freshest political trade secrets, things that we're seeing throughout the day, ways to talk about different issues in the news. We're providing that kind of stuff by signing up to be part of our texting community. So just go ahead and text 202-918-3345, and you'll get a text back. There'll be a link in it. Just click that link and you'll be able to opt in. That way we can do all the legal mumble jumble to make sure that it's all legal. So go ahead and do text us and join that community, as well as if you'd like to become a Political Trade Secrets insider, go to politicaltradesecrets.com, sign up, and you will get all sorts of exclusive stuff from us if you go and you sign up there today.
Yeah.
Now, Sean, tell folks how else they can be involved.
Absolutely. Look, are you thinking about running for office? Want to bring this type of strategy and insight to your campaign or your organization? Reach out to us today. It's olsonstrategies.com, OLSON strategies.com, and we look forward to that conversation. You can email me. It's Sean, SEAN, at olsonstrategies.com, or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com, and let's have that conversation. And then we're also proud to be sponsored by Grassfire. What do? Canvassing, petitioning, live calling. It's on your doorstep, in front of the grocery store, or over the phone. All of the one-on-one, human-to-human interaction. You get one shot at a first impression. Make it count with Grassfire. It's www.grassfire.us. And then they also fuel 10centtexting.com. It is your way to communicate with your constituents, your voters, right where they are on their mobile device. 82% of people open every text message they get. Of those, 90% open it within 3 minutes. Look, we are in a world where the information is always changing. Why not get your message out to the people who need to hear from you most quickly and easily with 10centtexting.com, and have the most impact you can have with your constituents and your voters. Dustin.
Well, very good. Thank you very much for sharing that. And for those of you who might want to intern or be a fellow, so we have an internship program and fellowship with Political Trade Secrets and with Olson Strategies and with any of the different campaigns that we might be involved in. You have the ability to be a political leader and to make a difference and learn a lot of these things that we're talking about in the show. And if you'd like to do that, go to olsonstrategies.com or email us at Sean and Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. I'll do that separately so that's not so confusing. Sean at olsonstrategies.com or Dustin at olsonstrategies.com. We are taking on a whole new class of folks right now to help with really this effort to empower political leaders in order to reignite American patriotism. We really do appreciate everybody's help with that. And if you want to be a part of that and really to develop yourself as a political leader, you can join us in that as well. Thank you to everybody who shared the program today. It looks like we had quite a few shares. I'm not quite sure what it's at yet, but quite a bit. I think we're approaching 100 shares. So thank you very much. And who knows what aspiring conservative leader is going to come out of you sharing this and inspiring somebody to step up, to speak up, to show up, to make the difference, to help reignite American patriotism. We really do appreciate you doing that. Sean, any last thoughts as we wrap the show?
Well, really just a great week of shows. Really enjoyed it. Really appreciate you taking the time to share what you've been developing here. And I think it's been great for a great conversation for me to have, and I really enjoy the fact that our audience seemed to enjoy it as well. So we really appreciate that, and thanks, and hope everybody has a great weekend and gets to enjoy it, and just really a fun topic.
Yeah. Well, thank you to everybody. We really appreciate you. Join us again on Monday at around 11 a.m. as we share more great political trade secrets. Have a great weekend, and we will see you on the other side.
Join us next time by subscribing on iTunes and get show notes and sign up for our newsletter at politicaltradesecrets.com.